So cosmological argument is a family of arguments, Muhammad. It's not just one particular type of argument. So a contingency argument, a design argument, or teleological argument, the Kalam cosmological argument, they would all be within the general definition of what we'd call a cosmological argument. Yeah. Now,
Okay.
contingency. So a contingency argument, the difference between maybe specifically contingency and Kalam argument is that
Yes.
Kalam tries to address the issue that something began to exist. Yeah. So something that began to exist requires a cause. So it didn't exist and then it existed. The contingency argument is slightly different because it doesn't have to posit a beginning of that thing. All it has to posit is that thing itself requires an explanation outside of itself. Yeah. And that explanation for its existence is something that's either another contingent being or a necessary being. Yeah. And it wouldn't be another contingent being because one of the ways of disproving that is the fact of an infinite regress. So it have to be some sort of necessary being. There are other ways that you can use from the contingency argument without even talking about an actual infinite or infinite regress as being impossible. So, let me give you an example. If you had theoretically a red triangle, yeah, the fact that it's red would indicate to us that it has a dependency upon something to have determined its redness, yeah, and that's what we would understand as the contingency of the thing, yeah. So even if it quote unquote is eternal, yeah, or has always existed, it will still always need something other than itself to exist. Yeah. Does that make
But
sense?
here's the problem. Like when you say that even if we consider an infinite possibility, a possibility of infinite universe or universe that's been existent for eternity, and still we need to have have something which on which the universe needs to be dependent on. But I can simply say, why do we need something to for the universe to be dependent on? Why the hell when it's been there for eternity?
Yeah, because it doesn't. Because when you have something that exists, there will be an explanation of why it exists. Now, the explanation either is contained within itself, or it's going to be contained within something other than itself. Yeah. Now, as rational human beings, when we see something and we know that the thing that exists has a explanation outside of itself, then you would seek sorry, it doesn't have an explanation within itself, then you're going to seek the reason for its existence outside of itself, yeah, or the reason for a particular property outside of itself, yeah. So if you had, like I said, if you had a triangle, then you're not going to ask the question, why does a triangle have three sides? Because it's by definition, yeah, it's an analytic proposition by
Yeah, right.
definition. But when it's red, the redness is not defined by the existence of a triangle. So you're going to have to
Right.
ask the question, what caused, or what's the explanation for the redness, yeah, or what caused it, which is outside of itself, yeah, but it's not
Right.
self-contained. So that's the reason. So in essence, there is a principle that we're adhering to, which is this idea of the principle of sufficient reason, that things that exist require, or things that are contingent, which is more of a modest claim, require an explanation for why they exist. If you identify that they're contingent, then you identify that there's an explanation behind this particular contingency, which is external to itself.
All right, that makes clear sense. My next question would be like, how would you address the issue of an infinite universe or universe that's been around for eternity without taking into consideration the problem of the problem of infinity? Like we end up in infinite regression. Only then we assume that there must be something necessary for the universe to come into existence. Like without considering this whole part, like suppose universe has been around for eternity, and suppose matter energy has been around for eternity, then
Yeah.
how would you say without using this, like suppose that being around for eternity is possible, then how would you actually address this issue of energy and matter energy not being necessary?
I think Jake actually mentioned it earlier with a previous question. The issue is that all you have to identify is contingency. So what do we mean by contingency? Something that is a possible existence. So it could exist, could not exist, one. Secondly, is it could exist in another way. Yeah, that the properties themselves are not necessary for its own, or they're not explained by its own existence. So
All right.
these are certain things. So all you have to do in regards to matter and energy is say, well, could it have been another way? Is it logically possible that it could have been another way? I think even Abdul mentioned this point about
Yeah,
nomenological
right.
possibility and metaphysical possibility. So if it could have been metaphysically possible that it could be another way, like the red triangle, then by definition it's contingent, and then by definition it requires, or it's dependent upon something else. So I don't even have to identify that the universe began to exist. Yeah. So that's all. It's from that argument.
Yeah, that's right. But when we take into consideration that that if the matter energy has been around for eternity, then
Yeah.
we wouldn't be here. Like the universe wouldn't even exist right now. Then that makes more sense than just saying that it could have been another way. It could have existed
But
in a
it
different way.
could Planck's constant be another way? Planck's constant's in relation to energy
Yeah,
as
it could
well.
have been could have been another way as well.
Right. So the universe could have existed with a different Planck's constant.
Yeah, right.
That which is related to energy, matter, and energy. So the fact that you have something that's relate that property of matter and energy that could have been another way, and still matter and energy exist, it indicates that matter and energy is not the explanation for Planck's constant. There's something other than itself, yeah, other than matter and energy that requires an explanation for Planck's constant.
Okay, so from here, how can we reach the argument for necessary being? Like we are not taking into consideration anything else. We're taking into this part like it could not have been another way. So for that to happen, there must be some cause. So
Then you could,
how do we
yeah.
get
So
there?
Abdul, go on, yeah.
So Muhammad, do you understand that matter and energy are contingent?
Yeah, I understand. They are contingent.
Yeah.
Contingent means not necessary.
Yeah, so all you need here, you don't even need to concern yourself with infinities. It can be an infinite number of contingent things. All you need is basically the proposition that contingent things exist. So if there is an explanation for that proposition, if there is an explanation for why it is, then and that explanation is external to the contingent things, the plurality of contingent things themselves, then by necessity it is a necessary thing. It is not a contingent thing. This is basically logically true because it's an explanation for all contingent things, and it cannot itself be contingent, right? Or else that's circular in a vicious
right.
way. It's not really an explanation. So is your concern about the properties of this necessary thing, how we know something is necessary?
My question is that without using Kalam cosmological argument, only by using contingency argument, how can we arrive at the attributes of God, attributes of necessary being?
I mean, the arguments. Each argument is gonna. There are many different forms to the arguments, right? And you're gonna take points
so
from
actually
everywhere.
We have to take into account both arguments.
No, I'm not really concerned with the name of the argument. Just focus on the ideas. So the contingency argument, once if you've reached the conclusion that a necessary being exists through, for example, the path the very simplistic presentation I just gave you, and there are many others. So there is a necessary thing right now. There's something called stage 2 cosmological arguments that can be a stage 2 Kalam cosmological argument, a stage 2 contingency argument, and they come in many different forms. So in the stage 2, you concern yourself with the properties of the necessary being. And remember, what started, what brought us to this investigation in the first place is the contingency of things. So we ask what makes us, inquire about the cause of things that are contingent. What makes us look at contingent things and attribute external explanations to them. And one of the most fundamental reasons is because these contingent things have arbitrary properties. They are one way rather than another. So if something has a particular color, shape, size, we always assume epistemically that there is an explanation for why something is the way it is, right? So right now here you have a what we call, like, it's a modal scope of logical possibilities. Things could have been many different ways, and you're going to keep asking why it is the way it is, unless you reach to a foundation where these questions stop. Now, at what point do they stop? I think they stop at the point where you reach a necessary being that grounds all logical possibilities. It's not just something that's
Can't we just
arbitrary
say that?
limited.
Can't we just say that these things, all these contingent beings, have been this way by a random chance? Like there's a random chance for them to be this particular way.
You can say that, but then good luck, because you're gonna that's a slippery slope to skepticism. So anything could be the case. You could be a brain in a vat right now, all your experiences can be illusory, and we just don't have any knowledge. But then
Mohammed, sorry, I was going to say, Mohammed, if you adopt that position, you might as well just throw all methodological approaches to thinking and knowing things in the bin. Because if it's literally anything,
actually, I've been faced by some atheists in the past, so these questions keep coming to my
Muhammad,
mind. That's
the
why
very question itself assumes that you can't say yes. It's a self-defeating question. I'll tell you why. It's because you're asking, can we do this? And you're looking for an answer that justifies the position that you can do it. So there is a reason for why you can do it. But if you can just,
have no reason.
accept things with absolutely no reason and just drop the principle of sufficient reason, then you don't even need to ask that question. But the reason you're asking that question is because you know that things must have reasons, right? So the point is, when you arrive at the necessary being that grounds all logical possibilities, and this is where we talk about omnipotence, because there's no asking, what is the causal limitation of God? Why can he cause this thing rather than that? For example, if you posit a necessary being that can only create red rocks, well, that's a bit weird. I mean, why can it only create red rocks? That seems like a very arbitrary limitation. It seems like a contingency. And that's where omnipotence comes into the picture. God can actualize all logically possible things. Whatever it is you mean by that, there's no more asking, why does this being have this arbitrary limitation in his causal capacity? That question is gone. It's out the window. So that's basically what you need to arrive at, the necessary being that grounds all logical possibilities, and a necessary being basically that doesn't have arbitrary limitations. And that's what we were talking about earlier. That leads to not just this basic conception, but also to monotheism and the idea of one God. Yeah.
One God as well. So Muhammad, the point being is that when atheists get to that position where they turn around and say, well, can it not just be random? Can contingent things just not have no explanation, or at least one contingent? They've lost the argument. Wallahi, they've lost the argument. And now I think that what they're doing is they're really trying to scratch around for something, some sort of reason not to believe. Because the consistency of the argument leads you to one necessary being. That's being rationally consistent leads you to this, with the least number of maybe metaphysical assumptions that you need to make. But with what they're doing is that they're using principle of sufficient reason, and that contingent things require an explanation up to a point, and then they're saying, right, I'm just going to throw it away, because if I continue to adhere to it, it will lead me to a God, it will lead me to a creator, and so then they leave it. And I think it's always difficult, it's always frustrating, but whenever I don't know, Mohammed, if you've seen our other streams, we've addressed a lot of these types of arguments, and I think one of the key discussions we had, which was similar to this, was one with Aaron Ra. And
I actually watched the video a few times. I actually liked it so much.
Alhamdulillah. So I think the key issue is this: is that, okay, do you accept magic? If you don't accept magic, then you accept that there's explanation. By magic, let's be really clear. By magic, what we mean specifically is that some event can occur and it has no explanation, whether that's naturalistic or otherwise. No explanation for its existence. If you don't accept that, that can be a possibility, then you're now forced into a position to accept basically a necessary being. But Jazakallah khair, Muhammad.
That answers all my question. There's one more question. You can actually answer it like for 1 minute.